Deep in the wilderness, a brutal snowstorm traps Emily alone in her remote cabin until she finds Daniel, a wounded stranger seeking refuge. But safety is an illusion. When armed men arrive, demanding Daniel's life, Emily realizes she's entangled in a deadly pursuit. With her fiercely loyal dog, Max, by her side, she must outthink and outfight the intruders. As the storm rages, the battle for survival begins, one where trust is fragile, danger lurks in every shadow, and the snow hides more than just footprints. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it a fresh flurry of snow that coated the landscape in a soft white veil. The wooden cabin stood alone at the edge of the forest, its warm light flickering through the frosted windows. Outside, standing tall and vigilant, was Max, a German shepherd with a thick coat of black and tan fur dusted in snowflakes. Max was no ordinary dog. He was Emily Carter's protector, her constant companion in the isolated wilderness of Pine Creek. After moving here a year ago to escape the noise of city life, she had found peace in the quiet, but also loneliness. That was until she found Max, half-starved and abandoned near an old logging road. She nursed him back to health, and since then, he never left her side. Tonight, the air felt different. A strange tension clung to the cold, and Max knew it. He stood by the wooden porch, eyes sharp, ears perked. The fire inside the cabin crackled, and Emily sat curled in a thick blanket, sipping hot cocoa, watching the snow fall outside. "Come inside, Max," she called through the slightly open door. "It's freezing out there." But he didn't move. Emily sighed. "Suit yourself." She turned back inside, stirring the fire. The storm was getting worse. The radio had warned of an incoming blizzard, and she was prepared. Plenty of firewood, food, and warm blankets. But something about Max's stance unsettled her. Then she heard it. A faint sound beyond the trees. Footsteps, crunching through the thick snow. Her body stiffened. Who would be out here this late, in this storm? Her nearest neighbor was miles away, and no one ever came this deep into the forest without reason. Max let out a low growl, his fur bristling. Emily grabbed a flashlight and cautiously stepped onto the porch. The freezing wind bit at her cheeks. She swept the light across the snow-covered trees. Nothing, but Max's growl deepened. Then a voice, a weak, trembling voice, called out from the darkness. "Hello? Please, I need help." Emily's breath hitched. She glanced at Max. His body was rigid, eyes locked in the direction of the voice. He didn't charge, but he didn't relax either. A shadow stumbled out from between the trees. It was a man, shivering violently, his clothes covered in snow. He clutched his sides, struggling to stay on his feet. Emily's instinct told her to be cautious, but she also couldn't leave someone to freeze to death. "Who are you?" she called out, gripping the flashlight tighter. My name is Daniel," he said, his teeth chattering. "My car broke down. I got lost." Emily hesitated. Could she trust him? The storm was brutal. If he was lying, he had to be truly desperate. Max stepped forward, still watching the stranger closely. He sniffed the air, his tail raised. Emily knew Max's instincts had never been wrong. If Max didn't trust him, neither would she. "Where's your car?" she asked, not moving from the porch. "Back, near the highway," Daniel said, barely able to speak through the cold. "I tried to find help." His knees buckled and he collapsed into the snow. Emily's heart pounded. She couldn't just leave him there. She took a step forward. Max tensed but didn't stop her. She knelt beside Daniel, checking his pulse. His skin was ice cold. He wasn't faking. He was on the verge of hypothermia. "Max, inside," she ordered. The dog hesitated but obeyed, walking in ahead of her, never taking his eyes off Daniel. Emily helped the man up, guiding him into the cabin. He was too weak to resist. She set him down near the fire, wrapping him in blankets. "Don't fall asleep," she said firmly. "You need to warm up first." Daniel nodded weakly, holding his frozen hands near the flames. "Thank you." Max sat near Emily, never looking away from the stranger. His protective stance reassured her. If Daniel tried anything, Max would be ready. She handed Daniel a mug of hot tea. "How long have you been out there?" "A few hours," he mumbled. "I was driving back from a job interview in town." Thought I could take a shortcut. Bad idea. My car hit ice, spun out, engine died. My phone's dead too. He gave a weak chuckle. Thought I was done for. Emily studied him carefully. His story made sense, but she wasn't one to let her guard down easily. She glanced at Max, who still hadn't relaxed. The blizzard outside raged harder, wind howling against the cabin walls. They were stuck together for the night, whether she liked it or not. Hours passed. Daniel had warmed up, his shivering subsiding. But Max remained on edge, his gaze flicking to the window every now and then. Then, just as Emily began to feel at ease, Max let out a deep, menacing growl. Emily's heart lurched. "What is it?" Max stood up, his ears alert. A sound, faint but clear. Another crunch in the snow. Emily's blood ran cold. Someone else was out there. Daniel looked at her, eyes wide. "You're not expecting anyone, are you?" "No," she whispered, her grip tightening on the flashlight. Max barked sharply, his stance shifting into full protection mode. Emily grabbed her old rifle from the wall. She had never used it outside of hunting, but right now she was grateful for it. She turned off the cabin lights, plunging them into shadows, and peered through the window. In the storm, a dark figure moved between the trees, watching, waiting. Panic surged through her. This wasn't just some lost traveler. Max snarled, pressing close to Emily as if to shield her. Daniel's face drained of color. I think someone followed me from the highway." Emily's stomach twisted. This wasn't a coincidence. A loud bang sounded against the cabin door. Then a voice. "Daniel, I know you're in there. Open up!" Emily's hands tightened around the rifle. Max's growl turned into a vicious bark, warning whoever was outside. Daniel swallowed hard. "That's not a friend." Emily's heart pounded. She had taken in a stranger, only to find herself in the middle of something much more dangerous than she had bargained for. Outside, the shadowy figure tried the handle, finding it locked. The storm roared. Max stood ready, and Emily knew one thing for sure. She wasn't letting anyone in. The pounding on the door grew louder. "Daniel, open the damn door!" Emily's grip tightened on the rifle, her heart hammering in her chest. The storm outside howled, the wind rattling against the wooden walls, but the voice on the other side was clear. This wasn't just a lost traveler. This was someone hunting Daniel. Max stood at the door, his body rigid, his sharp eyes locked on the wooden barrier, as if he could see right through it. His low growl rumbled like distant thunder. Emily glanced at Daniel, who had gone pale. "Who is that?" she whispered sharply. Daniel hesitated. I don't know." Max barked suddenly, loud and fierce, as if calling Daniel out on his lie. Emily turned on him, her voice cold. "I let you in. I saved your life. If you're putting me in danger, I need to know why." Daniel ran a shaking hand through his damp hair. "Look, I owe some people money. I thought I could disappear. I didn't think they'd actually come looking for me." Emily cursed under her breath. He wasn't just some stranded traveler. He was running from something, from someone. The banging on the door stopped. Silence, then a metallic click, the door handle twisting. Emily's stomach clenched. They were trying to get in. She didn't hesitate. She raised the rifle, aimed at the door, and shouted, "Get off my property!" For a moment, there was nothing. Then, laughter. A cold, amused chuckle from the other side of the door. "Feisty, huh? Listen, lady, this isn't about you. Hand over Daniel, and we'll be on our way. No one gets hurt." Max's growl deepened, the fur along his back rising like bristles on a brush. He sensed the danger. Emily's mind raced. She didn't know how many of them were out there, didn't know if they were armed. But she did know one thing. She wasn't handing Daniel over to anyone. "You step 1 foot inside and I'll make sure you regret it," she warned, cocking the rifle. Silence. Then footsteps, moving away from the door. Emily held her breath. Was it over? Were they leaving? Crash! The sound of glass shattering sent adrenaline surging through her veins. The window. They were coming in. Max spun, barking viciously as Emily whirled toward the noise. A dark figure pushed through the broken glass, their boots crunching against the shards. Emily didn't think. She fired. The gunshot rang through the cabin. The figure yelped and staggered back, grabbing their arm. The bullet had grazed them. Max lunged, a blur of black and tan, slamming into the intruder before they could recover. The man screamed as Max's teeth sank into his forearm, dragging him to the ground. Emily grabbed Daniel. "Move!" She yanked him toward the back door, heart racing. If there was one, there were more. They had to get out, now. But before they could take another step, bang! A second gunshot. Emily flinched, expecting pain, but it wasn't aimed at her. Max let out a sharp yelp and stumbled backward. Emily's heart stopped. "No!" She turned, rage burning in her chest as she saw a second man standing in the broken window, gun raised. Before he could take another shot, Emily fired back. The bullet slammed into the wall beside him, and he ducked. Max was still on his feet, snarling, but he was hurt. A thin line of red streaked across his shoulder where the bullet had grazed him. Rage surged through Emily's veins. "No one hurts my dog." She lifted the rifle, aiming again, but Daniel suddenly grabbed her arm. "We have to go!" More voices shouted outside, more figures moving in the snow. There were too many. Emily's breath came fast and shallow. They were trapped. But then, Max moved. Despite his wound, he charged the open doorway, barking with everything he had. His sheer presence made the attackers hesitate. Stumbling back into the storm, Emily didn't waste the opportunity. She grabbed Daniel and bolted for the back door. "Come on, Max!" Max ran with them, blood staining the snow as they sprinted into the night. The blizzard swallowed them whole. The forest was thick with snow, the icy wind whipping against Emily's face as she ran. Footsteps pounded behind them. The men were chasing them. "We can't outrun them forever," Daniel gasped. Emily scanned the trees. They needed to hide. Then she saw it. An old abandoned cabin just beyond the trees, barely visible through the snowfall. "There," she pointed. They pushed forward, slipping through the snow. The wooden door creaked as Emily shoved it open, and they stumbled inside. Max collapsed onto the floor, panting heavily. Emily immediately crouched next to him, checking his wound. The bullet had grazed his shoulder, not deep, but enough to slow him down. Emily's hands trembled. "You're okay, buddy. Just hold on." Daniel peeked through the broken slats in the wall. "They're looking for us." Emily's jaw tightened. They wouldn't stop, not until they found them. Max, despite his pain, struggled to his feet. His ears were still alert, his body still ready. Emily placed a hand on his head, her voice steady. "We're getting out of this, together." Daniel turned to her. "What's the plan?" Emily took a deep breath, gripping the rifle tighter. "The storm is on our side. If we can lure them further into the woods, they'll get lost. But we need to be smart." A slow smile crept across her face. "I have an idea." Max's tail flicked as if he understood. It was time to fight back. The wind howled like a wild beast, snow swirling in a blinding frenzy outside the abandoned cabin. Emily's breath came fast, her heart pounding. She could hear them, footsteps crunching through the snow, voices muttering curses. The men were closing in. Max, despite his wound, stood tall beside her, his ears pricked, his body tense. He wasn't just a dog, he was a fighter, a guardian. Daniel swallowed hard. "Emily, if we stay here, they'll trap us." She nodded. They needed to act now. Emily's mind raced. They couldn't outrun them, not in this storm, but they could outsmart them. She knelt beside Max, rubbing his fur gently. "Buddy, I need you to be strong just a little longer." His deep brown eyes locked onto hers, and he gave a quiet, determined whine. Then she turned to Daniel. "We split up. I'll draw their attention, and you sneak around to their snowmobiles. Slash the fuel lines, cut the ignition wires, whatever you can do to stop them from chasing us." Daniel hesitated. "And what about you?" Emily gave him a tight smile. "I'll make them regret ever stepping onto my land." Daniel nodded, determination replacing his fear. He gripped the knife she had handed him, took a deep breath, and slipped into the storm. Emily grabbed her rifle and turned to Max. "Time to show them what happens when you mess with us." Max let out a low growl, his golden brown fur bristling against the icy wind. They were ready. Emily ran out of the cabin, making just enough noise to be heard. "Hey!" she shouted, firing a shot into the air. The men spun around, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. "There she is!" one of them yelled. "Get her!" Perfect. She darted between the trees, dodging low-hanging branches, letting them chase her deeper into the woods. She could hear their grunts, the crunch of their boots struggling through knee-deep snow. They were slower than her, heavier, more desperate. They had no idea they were walking into a trap. Emily reached a small clearing where the snow was deep and untouched. She stopped, turned, raised her rifle. The first man lunged out of the trees, raising his gun. Snap! Before he could fire, Max exploded from the shadows like a lightning bolt, slamming into his chest with terrifying force. The man screamed as Max's powerful jaws latched onto his arm, dragging him into the snow. The second attacker skidded to a stop, eyes wide. "What the hell?" Emily didn't wait. She fired. The shot hit his shoulder, sending him sprawling backward with a cry of pain. His gun fell into the snow. Max growled, pinning the first man to the ground, his teeth bared. Emily leveled her rifle at the second one. "Drop it," she warned. He clutched his bleeding shoulder, breathing hard. His eyes flickered to his partner, who was still writhing under Max's grip, too afraid to move. Then, a third figure emerged from the trees. The leader. He was taller than the others, built like a tank, his dark coat flaring in the wind. He held a gun, aimed straight at Emily's chest. "I gotta admit," he said coolly, "you're tougher than I expected." Emily didn't lower her rifle. Neither did he. Max snarled. The tension crackled like ice ready to break. Then, boom! A distant explosion rocked the ground beneath them. The leader's eyes darted toward the noise. What? Daniel. He had blown up their snowmobiles. Emily took the shot. The bullet struck the leader's leg. He let out a furious roar, collapsing onto one knee. His gun fired wildly, the shot missing her by inches. Max lunged, his teeth snapping just as the man rolled away. The remaining two attackers panicked. One of them tried to run, but Emily fired into the ground at his feet. "Not so fast," she snapped. The leader gritted his teeth, glaring at her. "You think you've won?" Emily stepped closer, her breath fogging in the freezing air. "I know I have." A moment later, Daniel crashed through the trees, out of breath but grinning. "They're not going anywhere," he panted. "Snowmobiles are toast." Emily smirked. "Good." The leader clenched his jaw. His men were injured, disarmed, stranded. Emily pulled out her radio, her fingers steady as she pressed the button. "Sheriff? I've got some men trespassing on my land. They seem pretty lost. Might need a ride to the station." The leader's face twisted in fury. "You—" "Shut up," she cut him off. The sirens were already in the distance. The cops took them away, their angry shouts fading into the night. Emily knelt beside Max, running her fingers through his thick fur. "You okay, buddy?" He gave a tired huff and licked her face. Daniel chuckled. "I think that's a yes." Emily let out a deep breath. The storm was still raging, but for the first time in days she felt safe. She looked down at Max, her guardian in the snow. "Let's go home." And together they walked back to the cabin, where the fire still burned warm and bright.